What if I told you that one of the most powerful events in history was led by a king who had little power, a monarch whose influence was more symbolic than real, yet whose legacy would echo through the ages? This is the story of Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last Mughal emperor, a man who, despite his limited authority, became a beacon of hope for a nation yearning for freedom. He was a ruler in name only, a figurehead stripped of true authority by the British East India Company. His reign was marked by the constant overshadowing presence of British power. Yet in 1857 he became the face of a rebellion that shook the very foundations of British rule in India. The Indian Rebellion of 1857, also known as the First War of Independence, saw Zafar as a reluctant leader. Bahadur Shah Zafar was a man of contradictions, a king without a kingdom, a ruler without power, yet a poet whose words inspired many. He was a gifted poet and calligrapher, more comfortable in the world of art and literature than in the battlefield. His poetry reflected his inner turmoil and the changing times. He ascended the throne at the age of 62, inheriting a crumbling empire and a court riddled with intrigue. The Mughal court was a place of political maneuvering and betrayal. The once mighty Mughal dynasty was a shadow of its former self, its power usurped by the ambitious East India Company. The British had systematically dismantled the empire's authority. Zafar never sought power, nor did he possess the ambition to reclaim the lost glory of his ancestors. He was a man caught between the past and the present. He was a reluctant emperor, content to rule within the confines set by the British. His reign was more about survival than sovereignty. However, fate, it seemed, had other plans for the aging emperor. The rebellion of 1857 thrust him into a role he never desired. The winds of change were blowing across India, and Bahadur Shah Zafar, the poet-king, would find himself at the eye of the storm. His legacy, though marred by defeat, remains a poignant reminder of a nation's struggle for freedom. The year 1857 witnessed a series of events that would forever alter the course of Indian history. It was a time of great turmoil and unrest, a period when the seeds of rebellion were sown deep within the hearts of the Indian people. The introduction of the Enfield rifle, with its greased cartridges rumored to be tainted with animal fat, proved to be the spark that ignited the flames of rebellion. These cartridges, believed to be coated with cow and pig fat, were deeply offensive to both Hindu and Muslim soldiers. Sepoys, the Indian soldiers serving in the British Army, saw this as a blatant attack on their religious beliefs. The very idea of biting into these cartridges was an affront to their faith, leading to widespread anger and resentment. The rebellion, which began as a mutiny in Meerut, quickly spread throughout northern India like wildfire. What started as a localized uprising soon engulfed entire regions, with towns and cities rising up against British rule. The rebels, seeking a unifying figurehead, turned to the Mughal emperor in Delhi. They needed a leader who could symbolize their collective struggle and aspirations. Bahadur Shah Zafar, despite his reservations, was proclaimed the Emperor of Hindustan by the rebelling sepoys. His reluctant acceptance marked a significant turning point in the rebellion. He became a symbol of resistance against British rule, a rallying point for disparate groups united in their struggle for freedom. His name became synonymous with the fight for independence. Though hesitant at first, Zafar eventually embraced his role in the uprising. He understood the importance of his position and the hope it brought to the people. He issued proclamations against the British, urging Indians to fight for their independence. His calls to action resonated deeply, inspiring many to join the cause. His name, once a whisper in the corridors of the Red Fort, was now on the lips of every rebel, a beacon of hope in their fight against a common enemy. The rebellion of 1857 was not just a fight for freedom, it was a fight for identity, faith, and the right to self-determination. The rebellion of 1857 was ultimately crushed by the British, but not without significant bloodshed on both sides. The conflict, often referred to as the First War of Indian Independence, saw fierce battles and immense sacrifices from both the Indian sepoys and the British forces. Delhi, the seat of the Mughal Empire, was recaptured after a brutal siege. The city, once a symbol of grandeur and power, lay in ruins, bearing the scars of the intense conflict that had raged within its walls. Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last Mughal emperor seeking refuge in Humayun's tomb, was captured by the British. His capture marked the end of an era, a poignant moment in the history of the subcontinent. He was promised safe passage and protection if he surrendered peacefully. Trusting their word, Zafar laid down his arms, hoping for a dignified treatment in his twilight years. The British, aware of the symbolic importance of the Mughal emperor, faced a dilemma. They knew that Zafar's execution could ignite further rebellion, turning him into a martyr for the cause of Indian independence. Executing Zafar would make him a martyr, potentially fueling further unrest. The British were cautious, understanding the delicate balance they needed to maintain to keep control over the vast and diverse Indian subcontinent. Instead, they chose a different path, one that would effectively erase his legacy and dismantle the last vestiges of the Mughal Empire. By doing so, they aimed to weaken the symbolic power that the Mughal dynasty still held over the Indian populace. Instead of a trial for treason, which Zafar expected, the British labelled him as a harmless old man. This portrayal was a strategic move to undermine his authority and diminish his influence. They portrayed him as a victim of his own rebellious sepoys, a ruler forced into a role he never desired. This narrative painted Zafar as a passive figure, rather than a leader of a significant uprising. This narrative, carefully constructed by the British, served their purpose of diminishing Zafar's image as a leader of the rebellion. It allowed them to control the historical narrative, ensuring that the legacy of the Mughal Empire would fade into obscurity.